Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance will include medieval souvenirs, retrofitted doorbells, and mystical ink as we discuss the art of tattooing with Wassim Razzouk here on Created Things. Hello and welcome to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives and the only arts podcast where it doesn't really hurt that bad. It's more the repetition that drives you crazy. I'm artist and psychotherapist Jacob Flores Popchek, and with me is my good and excellent buddy, medievalist and Catholic priest, Father Gabriel Toretta. How are you doing on this very late evening, my friend?
I am jamming. I'm here. It's 11 o'clock in Chicago, which is nice. Actually, it could be worse. It could be midnight in Florida, but it's not.
Yes, well, it is midnight in Florida for me, which is not just the title of my forthcoming romance novel. It is actually chronologically midnight in Florida right now. I'm very excited for this. I've just chugged a quadruple espresso coffee.
Pro.
This is Created Things after dark, man. We're getting gritty. We're getting real. We're getting serious. And the reason we're staying up quite so late is because we got a friend joining us tonight for this episode who is joining us morning time for him from the Holy Land. So that means that we have to stay up extra super duper late in order to kind of meet in the middle. This is what good friends do, right? We bridge that gap. So without further ado, I want to welcome that friend to this episode now. He is the owner of Razzouk Tattoo, and I'm super, super enthusiastic to join him, to have him join us, I should say. Everybody, please welcome Wassim Razzouk. So nice to talk to you, sir.
Hello. Hi, nice to meet you guys. And thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to for the opportunity to talk to you because we've been wanting to do an episode on the art of tattooing for a really long time on this podcast. We're an arts podcast. We get into some of the weirder and less obvious art forms, right? Looking at it from kind of a spiritual perspective and getting into the different art forms. And for that reason, tattooing was right on the front of the list of topics we've wanted to cover for a long time. But when you agreed to be on the show, you're just a perfect person to talk about this because you own one of the world's oldest tattoo parlors. Can you just tell us a little bit about your shop and about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So we are a small little shop in one of those alleys in the corner of the old city little streets. And in this shop, there are a lot of very old tools and old books and designs that were used for centuries of tattooing and for tattooing pilgrims who come to the Holy Land to mark their pilgrimage. They come to this shop and get a small tattoo or maybe a bigger design tattoo to mark their pilgrimage as a certificate of pilgrimage. And so my family has been doing this continuously from one generation to another, stepping down all the way, and we go back to about 700 years back to Egypt. So we've been doing tattoos in Jerusalem for 500 years. But for 200 years before that, we did tattoos in Egypt also for Christians, which is a tradition that is still going on until today. Basically, this is what we do.
That is super, super exciting.
It's so amazing. I have to say, I never thought I would find a tattoo studio that every scholarly article on Christian tattoos mentions. So like, I'm an academic, so you know, I when I want to get into a subject, I'm going to look at, you know, published articles, books, like what other scholars have been saying about these things. And the fascinating thing doing research about Christianity and its relationship to tattoos is that everybody mentions your shop. Everybody talks about this and describes about it. There's an article that was published in 2020 called "The Imprint of the Pilgrimage: An Ethnography of a Tattoo Studio in Jerusalem." That is just the author spending 11 pages talking about his visit to your shop. But there's a ton of these, and in fact, every place where people want to talk about what Christians have done with tattoos, they have to talk about your shop and your family, because you can't tell the story of how Christians have engaged with tattoos in the Holy Land without talking about your shop.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, we are blessed by that. I mean, if you would have told my father this would be the case, he wouldn't believe. I mean, back in the days, there were a lot of, not a lot, but you know, a few articles about us written in a few newspapers and some tattoo magazines. And when I say back in the day, I mean probably around maybe around the 70s probably, or the 60s.
Oh, sure.
And so now we are 50 years later, and the shop is much more famous and well known, and probably that's with the help of the internet and with the help of all those publications that are accessible to people that were not accessible back then. You know, back then you only had books and newspapers and magazines to research in. Nowadays, it's just the click of a button, and you reach a lot of information. So we are blessed by that, and you know, we love what's happening, and it's great, and hope things will be better and more.
We hope that for you as well. You mentioned that, you know, your family started 700 years ago doing this. And, you know, to me, you know, and Father Gabriel, both people who are, you know, artists who get into kind of the weirder corners of the Christian experience, that makes perfect sense. But to most people, the idea of Christianity and tattooing, those two things don't really go together. A lot of people don't think that those two things go together. The idea of, you know, crusading, like pilgrims during the Crusades and the early times of Western history, going and getting tattoos in Egypt and then the Holy Land, that just doesn't occur to them. Could you walk us through a little bit more the family history, how you guys got into this, how this became your family thing, even your own experience with that? Because I mean, I got to imagine you growing up with that kind of heritage had to be a pretty wild thing to be stepping into that tradition. I'm just curious, that kind of lineage, for you to explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So from my memories, how I remember the family and tattooing, of course, is the fact that there were always pilgrims around, and that's what I always remember. I was, when I was a little kid, I would go to my grandfather's house, which was maybe about 4 or 5 minutes walk from our house where we lived in the old city, of course. And my grandfather's house was on the Christian Quarter Street, which is 1 minute away from the Holy Sepulchre Church. And so to imagine a little bit, one of those streets full of shops, but then you would have to go in one small little door on the Christian Quarter Street with a sign that says Razzouk tattoo on it. And the entrance was an entrance to a house. It wasn't an entrance to a shop. It was not a shop. But you had to go up a few steps, and then there was a small door again where you would go inside, and you would see my grandfather sitting next to a window for light, of course, and a small table and some of the old tools. So when I used to go to the house, in Easter season, it was almost impossible to enter because there were so many pilgrims waiting in line, sitting on the stairs all the way down to the street, to the Christian Quarter Street, waiting for their turn to be tattooed by my grandfather. So, from my memory, this is what I remember. My aunt also. I was a little kid. I was, of course, very small, about 3 years, 2, 3 years old. I remember. But then later on, after my grandfather died, um, it was my aunt who was actually doing tattoos in the same place, in the same house, and we would go there and of course play around with the pilgrims, and I used to see, always those pilgrims with their arms wrapped after they had finished their tattoos, and sometimes they would let us go inside and watch, and see me and my cousins and my sisters, just to see what they were doing, and watch the process. But that's the atmosphere that was always happening in this house during Easter season, which is the highest season of pilgrimage. And and of course, and then when I grew up, I wasn't interested anymore in this. I was interested in other things. So for me, tattooing was not anymore a thing that I wanted to watch, because I watched enough,
Ah,
and and but but then my father was always asking me to continue doing tattoos and to start doing tattoos. And that was, around the time when I was probably around about 25 years old or something like that. Although by then I was working, doing other jobs and working other things. I had just a normal job, and and he was always mentioning the tattoo and the tattooing, and he was, trying to force it in a way, in a nice way, that it's something that I should continue to do because it's the family history. And maybe because of that, it was not very interesting to me, because also the way I remembered things and how my aunt and I, used to do things, it was not very clean. And back then they were doing tattoos, just, I don't know, no gloves and no. All you could actually, what I would remember from it is the smell of arak, which is an alcoholic beverage. It's like ouzo, and they
okay.
used it a lot to, of course, to to clean the wounds and clean their tools and needles, and which were used.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so that was, in my head, this is how what tattooing was, and it was not interesting to me because I didn't want to do this. But then what caught my attention was that one time I came to my father's shop, which is a souvenir shop in Jaffa Gate, where he had at the back of the shop a corner set up only for tattoos. And every now and then I would go to the shop and see my father tattooing a tourist with a cross, or even sometimes just a normal flower, or or a butterfly, which most of the time did not look like butterflies, but he still did tattoos because a lot of people wanted to come and get tattooed by the family. So as you can tell, my father was not the best tattoo artist. And the other story, of course, of the other family member that always I never saw in front of my eyes, people doing tattoos there, but the family was talking about my father's cousin, who was a woman also tattooist, and she was tattooing also pilgrims, but most of the time she was not. She was just tattooing everybody, and um, and so all of this is in the back of my head: the tattoo, the tattoo, the tattoo, the tattoo. And when my father told me that I need to start doing it, that's what I thought of, and I didn't want to do it. I really did not want to do it. But then when I was about 33 years old, something clicked, and I can't remember what it is. I think it was the internet. I think I just one time
Huh.
I decided to. There was no Google back then. There was Yahoo, I think, and I decided to Yahoo our family name. So I just clicked in Razzouk, And I saw a few things online back then, which was like really weird because there wasn't so many things on the internet. And there was things about my family name, my family. And I read a few things. And one of the things that I read was an article that was interviewing my father. And he said that he was going to be the last one of 26 generations of tattooing lineage, because none of the new generation, and it wasn't only specifically talking about me, he was talking about the whole next generation, which included my cousins, of course, that none of them were interested to continue doing the tattoos. And so I think that interview, that article clicked, and that article caused me to think. First of all, this is something on the internet, which is something interesting to me. And secondly, the words, and I felt the weight of this responsibility that my father was always telling me I needed to do. So so I thought about it, and then I talked to my father. I said, "Okay, what do you have to give me to start doing this, other than a few tools?" So he gave me a book, and that book was a very old book. Um, um, it was published in 1956, I think, by an author called John Carswell. And in this book, there were some designs, and 147 designs specifically, of drawings, just the prints of old designs. And many of those I remember very well, like the St. George, like the Jerusalem cross. Those are designs that I used to see all the time on pilgrims, and not even just on pilgrims, also on local people who, in the old city would have, and have it on their forearms. The St. George, for example, is one of the main ones, and that was what I started with, to research historically, and I read the book, and I was overwhelmed by the fact that this is not just my grandfather. This was really before that, and there were stories of pilgrims who received tattoos and documented their experience of receiving tattoos in the Holy Land. And go back to 1669, where they would have one of those pilgrims had an image of his arm with the Jerusalem cross on it, and the date 1669 on it, and he wrote specifically that he received it in the old city of Jerusalem using a wooden block as a stencil for his tattoo. And that is something that really clicked, because that image of that Jerusalem cross was one of the stamps that my father gave me, among other stamps that he gave me, of the wooden stamps, wooden blocks that had those designs in them, as that we used as tools. And I looked at it very closely, and it was, wow. I thought this is the same stamp. This is really the same stamp. It's just broken, and you can see that it was, like, this is exactly the Jerusalem cross. Luckily, is not broken, but then there are 3 crowns on top, and the crowns match exactly the image, and under it there is like a wreath that says Jerusalem in Roman. And I thought, wow, this is the actual stamp that was used in 1669. This is it. I have it with me in my hands. I'm holding it, along with other stamps that I had with the St. George, and they were all just put in one, like a small metal container that used to have chocolate in it before that, like a metal. That's how my father had it. That's where my father had them stored. And he
airtight museum conditions, right?
Yeah, honestly, they were very luckily he put them in this. I guess they didn't have any other way to put them. So So that really, really triggered my interest, and I wanted to know more and more. The book was an interesting research, and then the internet started. I started researching more and more on the internet. But before that, I once went to my father's shop where it was full of people, full of pilgrims who wanted to get tattoos, but because it was so full during Easter season again, my father would always bring Russian tattoo artists, Christian Russian tattoo artists, and Christian is very important
Right.
because there were and still are Christian Russian tattoo artists who work in normal tattoo shops in Tel Aviv, mostly in Tel Aviv back then, because in Jerusalem there were only one or two tattoo shops. So he would go to Tel Aviv, bring a couple of tattoo artists to help him in the shop to tattoo those big groups of people who would come in during Easter season again. So at one time I was in the shop and I saw how the Russian artists worked. And I loved how they did things, and I liked how they did things. It was all clean, needles were clean, needles were open in front of the clients, new gloves, everything was thrown back in the garbage bin after they finished everything. And the clients were happy. And I thought, wow, this is really an art. It's nice, it's beautiful. And with all those pilgrims waiting a couple of hours, 3 hours sometimes in line just to get a tattoo, from a business point of view, I thought, this is great. I can do something nice if I know how to tattoo like those Russian guys know how to tattoo. And so I decided to start, and I told my father, okay, I'm going to start, but you're going to stop because I will do things differently. It's not going to be the same way the family did it. Specifically, again, with the details of how tattoos were being done and how the image of the shop was going to be. Because for a lot of pilgrims, they would come in and say, I have $10, I want to get a tattoo. And I thought, that's not being appreciated. My father would ask for $50, they pay $10. But my father was used to that because he had a souvenir shop. And souvenir shop in the old city, you ask 50 to get a 10, right? So,
okay.
But I thought this is not going to happen for tattoos. It's going to be a little bit different. And the whole model in my mind started, being built up a little bit. And I saw what an opportunity. And I thought, okay, we're going to do something nice about this. And that's why I told my father, you have to stop. Because he was pushing all the time. Never mind the price, just do whatever. And I was like, no, I'm going to start working. It's going to be like a professional studio, And the question was about the history, and again, in my mind, the history is alive because I saw all those pilgrims. Now, the pilgrims would come and get tattoos because they were told to get tattoos while they were in the Holy Land and not to come back without one. And that happened and still happens all the time until now. I see it. Because they saw their grandparents or parents who had tattoos on their arms when they were in the Holy Land, when they did their pilgrimage. And that goes back another generation and another generation and another generation. So a lot of times I would see an old lady of 100-year-old. I have tattooed a 101-year-old lady. And who wanted to come to the Holy Land and would not want to leave the Holy Land before she got her tattoo, because her grandmother got a tattoo in the Holy Land when she was here doing her pilgrimage. So as you can see, the history is still alive. It's not just in the books. I feel the history. I hear the stories. I have tattooed a woman who while I was tattooing her, she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? Is this painful? She said, no, it's a spiritual experience for me because when I was here, I can't remember, 60 years ago with my mom, we went to your grandfather to get a tattoo along with the group that we were with. But I freaked out. I was scared. I didn't want to get a tattoo. And then my mom said, it's okay, don't worry. We will come back next year and get it. But then next year was 1967, and they could never come because they were from Lebanon. So, but now that she is, I think she was French. She moved and immigrated to France. Now she could come to Israel on her French passport and get a tattoo. And so when she was getting the tattoo, she said, "This is for me and my mom." The tattoo that we never got back then. So it is a spiritual experience, as you can see. And as I said, the history is alive. So it's not just in the books. For me, it's alive. It was more in the beginning, especially, which really, really, really made me want to start. And that's when I started, and then more research was done, and more research, and then the internet was becoming bigger and bigger, and then some journalists started coming, and I remember shortly after that, I opened a Facebook page, and there was no online website about Razzouk Tattoo, just a Facebook page, and that caught the attention of some people. And I remember specifically one journalist who came, and he was traveling from one place to another, and then I just can't remember which article was that, but then he said, they called me and they said, "We need to come and to shoot a video about you and about the history of the shop." And I agreed, of course. And I remember after that, more and more journalists started coming, and just things started happening. Because I guess because the new generation, me taking over and starting doing things, and the Facebook page and the exposure that I didn't think was going to be so much, and then so the journalists started coming and started writing more and more about us, and that also triggered me to look for more and more into the history and get more information about the stamps, about pilgrims who came, stories about royalties who got tattoos in the Holy Land, the British royalties, about the Emperor Haile Selassie, the story of Haile Selassie, which I used to hear all the time. My father used to tell me, "Your grandfather tattooed the Emperor of Ethiopia." And I was like, "Who
amazing.
Ethiopia? I mean, I don't care." But when you read about it, and as I said, when I became more mature and I got into it, really, I wanted to collect all those stories that were told. I wanted to get it in my head so I can also tell the story, to
right. It's your heritage.
Yes.
It's your art
So
form.
I learned
It's
more
who
and
you
more.
are.
And then the things I used to hear from my father, from my aunt, things that were just stories became reality to me. And I live the history by seeing all those pilgrims telling you all those stories about their grandfather, grandparents getting tattoos from my grandparent. It all just became bigger and bigger in my head, and the research and the internet and the Facebook page, the exposure, more and more people wanted to come get tattooed. More and more people wanted to come and do some research, do interviews.
It just builds and it builds and it builds. And
then one time I was tattooing somebody who contacted me through Facebook. He was a pastor from the United States. And he said, "Why don't you have a website?" I said, "Who needs a website? Nowadays, website is old-fashioned. Facebook." He said, "No, you need a website." I said, "Facebook, that's all I need. It's good enough. I have, enough emails and
I love how old-fashioned that sounds right now. It's true. That was the thing. But I love now it's like Facebook.
And so I tattooed him. He went back home. Maybe after a month, he sends me an email. "Hi, Wassim, how are you? I got a little gift for you. I hope you like it." And I look in the email, and there's a link, www.razzouqtattoo.com. He created a website for us. And he took all the pictures and the information from the Facebook page, which I had created. And he sent me that website link. And I was, okay, that's nice. I mean, whatever. It's nice. Thank you. And I sent him back. And a couple of years later, he came back with more people, with a group of people, and I tattooed them, and we became very good friends. So, yeah. So with Facebook,
it's
with the website.
if I can interject, I mean, it's literally the ancient meeting the modern. I mean, it's this ancient art, and your story is the story of trying to figure out and experiment with how that ancient art can be integrated with the modern in this really, really beautiful way.
Yep.
And I think that's really cool that you as an artist are able to take ownership that way and bring your own self to it and keep the art going and keep it perpetuating.
Mm.
I think that's really, really beautiful. I want, on the note of you being an artist, though, to ask more about your own artistic process, if I could, because, we talk a lot on this show, and I think you'd agree with me here, Father Gabriel, that there's a certain spirituality that different artists can bring to their practice of a given art. So if I'm a painter, maybe there are certain spiritual insights I have as a painter, or certain spiritual practices I'm bringing to painting. If I'm a dancer, there are certain spiritual insights I have as a dancer, and also certain spiritual practices I'm bringing to choreographing a dance. Right. And I think you being part of this heritage and part of this tradition and having this insight into pilgrims where they're in these very spiritual, vulnerable moments, right, at the height of their faith experience, have got to have some interesting spiritual insights and practices that you bring to your own work. I mean, what does it look like for you when you sit down to begin to tattoo someone? What are the spiritual practices or insights you're bringing into that individual process?
I have to be honest that in the beginning, for me, it was a little bit difficult to understand the importance of the spirituality of it, but more of the tradition of it. So, in the beginning, it was more traditional. It was just the tradition that needed to continue. And as I said, from the people and the history and the living history, that was
right, upholding that heritage. Yeah.
Yes. And so I can't say that I was doing any spiritual practices or putting any like scents or doing any like candles or no. It was just a shop. You had to come in. You had so many people to tattoo. You need to do it as fast as possible. And by the way, it's still sort of like this. However, and your question is very interesting. With my experience and literally touching the people that I have tattooed in my life, and I cannot even imagine to count how many, because we tattoo a lot of people every day. That created in me the sense of the spirituality of it. From the people, from the pastors, from the priests, from the nuns that I have tattooed, from the old people, and even the young people who come and want something small, not necessarily across, maybe a verse from the Bible, or maybe something that is special for them, from the Bible to draw or to do only, even sometimes just to write the reference of a verse. And that was something new for me because I know a cross, but why a reference to a verse? But then I learned and I felt people and I saw, wow, if people talk about it. And this is my favorite verse in the Bible. And this is, things like this that you hear, then you become really, you want to know more. And I wanted to know more and I learned a little bit more. And then I started understanding more the spirituality sense of it. And it started getting in me, and I started learning more and more and growing in this. And of course, that started to be part of the tattoo procedure when somebody comes to the shop. You talk to them. It's not just, hi, how are you? What do you want to get a tattoo? No, it's like, hi, how are you? Where do you come from? Who are you? What's your name? And then they tell you the story. They tell you why they want to be, or they tell you how, how excited they are. It's part of this, the highlight of our pilgrimage being here. So you need to understand more those people and what they are, where they coming from, why they are getting this tattoo. Sometimes you do get those, I want a butterfly, but and nothing about, I have nothing about against butterflies. And I
No hate
don't
on the
like
butterfly
doing
people.
butterflies, by the way. But it's just the reason. Maybe somebody wants a butterfly to represent the new birth of them becoming reborn in Jesus, and that's beautiful. That's something that I enjoy doing. But again, so the spirituality part of it, the spirituality sense of it, came to me, and I became, I learned it through the people who came, and through the pastors, and through the priests and the nuns. And sometimes they would say, can we pray before we start? Or sometimes they would say, this is for my late father, or this tattoo is for my late son, or I lost a son, I lost a daughter, and this is why I'm here in the Holy Land. And sometimes they cry, sometimes they laugh, sometimes they are in pain, not necessarily just physical pain. And all of this, runs into you, and you learn, and then you become. And I myself now consider, myself more spiritual than when I started 16, 17 years ago. And every time I tattoo somebody, for me, and now my sons are doing tattooing, and for them it's just they need to do this tattoo as fast as possible because we have many people waiting outside. But for me it's not like that. For me it's more spiritual, it's more important. I sometimes look at my son doing a tattoo to somebody, and he doesn't even talk to them, and I'm like, after he finishes, I talk to the client. I say, was this your first tattoo, sir? How did it feel? Are you happy? Is everything okay? you know um uh and sometimes I have to admit I don't have time to talk to so many people, or to talk so much to people. But at least, what's your name? Where do you come from? Story of their faith. Why are you? How is the Holy Land for you? Where, things like that. So I'm now teaching my sons to do that, and I'm like, this is not just a tattoo. You don't just give them a tattoo and say bye. No, it's more of the spiritual experience that they want to feel also. And imagine a 60 or 70-year-old man or lady that never thought to get a tattoo. And now they are getting their first tattoo in this little shop. And you need to give them the right experience also of their first tattoo, especially specifically when it's their first tattoo. And it's very, for me, it's very sensitive when it's their first tattoo. When it's not the first tattoo, it's not so sensitive. I don't know why. I guess they just, they haven't lost their virginity yet. Honestly, this is how they feel. People feel like they are just losing their virginity now to you as a tattoo artist by giving them their first tattoo. And it's a very spiritual experience for them. And I honestly, yesterday, I tattooed this young lady, and it was her first tattoo, and she was very hesitant. And then I gave her the tattoo, and just before I started tattooing, she said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna start crying." I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Just let me cry." I said, "Okay, so cry." So she shed a few tears. I stopped a little bit, and then I said, "Can I start now?" She said, "Yes, you can start." So she had to go through that, honestly, losing the virginity of her skin that was never tattooed before, to this tattoo artist who was going to give her a small tattoo. She loved it, of course. She was so excited and so happy. And of course, I have to put a joke into it always, tell them this is not going to be your last tattoo because, we put some bugs in the ink that will go into your blood and will reach your brain and will make you think of your next tattoo right away. And sometimes, honestly, I'm serious. Sometimes I'm tattooing somebody and they would be, oh, wow, this is not so bad. Wow, yesterday specifically again, this young man, he said, wow, this is not so bad. I was tattooing a cross for him over here, and he's like, oh, this is not so. It doesn't hurt. I'm gonna get more.
Oh my gosh,
it's already working. You haven't finished your first tattoo yet.
It's amazing.
As someone who has gotten a few tattoos, I can vouch for that. You think of the next tattoo you want as you're walking out the door from the tattoo parlor of the last tattoo.
Incredible.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I wonder if I could jump in though to I think about it. Sort of your reflections from maybe the pilgrim, your reflections about what the pilgrims might be thinking. So, thinking about this, like historically, of course, like I love that you got excited about this and interested in this because of like seeing the richness of the history and the tradition, because that's sort of how I get interested in things as well. And, okay, so from thinking about people from Western Europe specifically, coming to the Holy Land and leaving with things. There's this rich documentary tradition that we know these things happen. So the earliest one is this, it's right, like Egeria, right, in around like 381. And like when she's writing, what they do is that the pilgrims from Western Europe, when they come to the Holy Land, what they do is they touch everything. They go to where they think the wedding at Cana is, and they like write their names under the seat where they think it was, or like the names of their parents. They like take chisels and they break pieces of things, and they take these pieces of stone home. Don't do this at home, kids. So they do all this. By the time that it's like the 9th century, the 10th century. What they're doing, what they're bringing, and what they're leaving is images for the most part. So they go and they get an image from the Holy Land. They bring the image back, and now the image is a part of their practice. All of a sudden, so to speak, just from a documentary perspective, all of a sudden in 1564, we have our first reference to a Western European pilgrim coming to the Holy Land, getting a tattoo now. So it's both tactile from before, and it's an image from the middle period. But from 1564 on, it's a flood. Then it never stops. It never stops. We never stop with indications that this is happening. And I wonder, just like, I don't know, what's your sense of that? Like from as somebody coming in to this experience of the Holy Land, like, you say, obviously, like some people, they just say like, well, I now it's in the air. I know this is a thing that somebody does when he goes to the Holy Land, that he can get a tattoo, but like, I don't know, but why would I do it? Like what does this bring? Like as a spiritual reality, as a thinking about like my physical engagement with the Holy Land, like memory. I don't know. Like, what role do you think this is playing?
Why do I want to bring this back with me?
Yeah, like this particular thing rather than anything else.
Okay, so okay, a few things here. First of all, you are right. They from the things that I have seen in my own eyes are engravings of small crosses in the Holy Sepulchre Church of pilgrims who used to go and chip a few stones and engrave a small cross. And I haven't seen names. I don't know. I have seen crosses inside stones carved by pilgrims. So, and then from my knowledge and from what I heard from priests, that they were prohibited from doing that after, I think maybe something like maybe around that time that you're talking about, maybe around the 9th or 10th century, where they stopped them from doing that. But and then I think around that time was that they wanted to take something from the Holy Land with them. Um, I don't think there were souvenir shops back then. I think there were stones, and there were olive trees that they would take a branch from it or something to take home, or water from the Jordan River, or some holy oil from the Holy Sepulchre Church. But it's so the if you can go just a little bit and think about it, 1,000 years ago, a pilgrim would come here on ship or on boat or on land, or however they used to come here. Uh, they, they couldn't carry things with them, so they had to, you know, even when they used to come here, they used to bring their tools of whatever they used to of whatever their profession was, to be able to work and make money and eat and survive, and then maybe go back home. That's how we
Right.
brought our tools from Egypt. When my great ancestors came to the Holy Land for pilgrimage, they brought their tools, their tattooing tools, with them, to do tattoos, because they wanted, this is their profession. And then when they saw that there were, there were more people who wanted to get tattoos, more in the Holy Land than whatever there was in Egypt back in their own town, and they would pay more for it. They stayed here, so that's how we stayed in the Holy Land. But so if a pilgrim wanted to take something with them to go back home and prove that they were in the Holy Land, that would not be a golden cross or because then they will lose it on the way, or they might be killed for it, on the way back home, by looters or thieves, so the best thing was really to get a tattoo from the Holy Land, in the Holy Land, by somebody from the Holy Land, and that would be the perfect proof, but also something that they would take with them on their own body to the grave, and not only back home. They would take it to the grave with them, a cross and a proof of their pilgrimage, and a reminder of their pilgrimage that they will have usually on the right hand, or the right arm, sorry, or the wrist. This is where the most exposed place that you could have on your body, other than on your face, of course. So each time you extend the arm, you want to shake hands, somebody would see the cross, and not only that, they would also see that you've been to the Holy Land, seeing that you are now a pilgrim, which gives you a certain status in your own community, that wow, he made it. This person went to the Holy Land, the journey of a lifetime, and also it would open up the opportunity for people to talk about their faith, the experience, about Jesus, about the Bible. So for many pastors nowadays, is the main reason why they have a lot of tattoos on places that are shown. And when they are talking on YouTube and we are talking, you see the tattoos, and when I tattoo those pastors specifically, they say, we want this tattoo in a place where everybody sees it, so I can talk about Jesus. I want to talk to people. I want to be asked, what is this tattoo? Want to talk about this. So if you can imagine, the same thing would be for those pilgrims who came and made the journey of a lifetime. And so not only that, so if you were a pilgrim back then, you would want to go to a church or the Holy Sepulchre Church, and you need to visit the Holy Sepulchre Church. And there, on the courtyard of the Holy Sepulchre Church, there were tattoo artists sitting around with their blocks, with their wooden stamps, with their tattoo tools, and people were getting tattoos there. And then I guess that people would see that and they would be like, what are they doing? And then, oh wow, getting a tattoo, I want to get this, and then I want to get this. And then when they go back home, they show it, and then the next generation who comes, they want to get the same thing, and then it became a tradition. So that's why people come to our shop to get a tattoo. 74-year-old lady who had always told her her grandchildren not to ever get a tattoo because it's not good. And now she's sitting in my shop and saying, I can't believe I am getting this tattoo because I have been telling
I love it.
my children and my grandchildren not to get tattoos, and now I'm getting this tattoo. I can't believe I'm doing this. Honestly, I'm telling you, this is what they say. I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then they're
I'm
like,
sure you hear that all the time. I'm
but
sure you
the
hear that all the
story
time.
and the history and the tradition of getting a tattoo as a pilgrim, this is different. This is not a cosmetic tattoo. This is a certificate.
Sure.
And then that's what I tell them. This is
interesting
of your pilgrimage. That's what my grandfather used to say. And you go back home and you tell your grandchildren that they cannot get a tattoo still, except for if they come to the Holy Land.
Unless I love that. I love that.
I want to just interject really quickly because I'd be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to some of the artists and communities that support this very podcast. This podcast is brought to you guys by the organization Catholic Creatives, which you can find at catholiccreatives.org, and also by the website catholic.store. Catholic Creatives, for its part, is a global community of Catholic artists who interact and support one another via online, not only Facebook group, but also in-person summits and meetups and workshops. And you can support their efforts and the efforts of this podcast by going and becoming a member of their Patreon at catholiccreatives.org/support. And then if you want to support independent Catholic artists like Wassim, you can purchase a lot of great Catholic art goods via catholic.store, not catholic.org/store or anything like that, but catholic.store. So check out both of those things today. There's something I want to key in on, and then I have a question for both of you, but there's just something I want to key on really quickly because we talk on this podcast all the time about the intimacy of art, the relationship between the artist and the person viewing it. So like when I go to a museum, for instance, and I look at that painting, there is actually an intimacy and a relationship occurring between me and the artist who painted that. And I think the more that intimacy and relationship is leaned into on the part of the artist and on the part of his or her creative process, the more that the art really shines. I think this is pretty universally true. This is a belief of mine. And I think that idea is so present in everything you're talking about, Wassim, because, the intimacy between artist and the person who's getting the tattoo is so intense, right? You're talking about encountering them in their spiritual vulnerability, in their emotional vulnerability, at crossroads in their lives as they're mourning things, as they're celebrating things. That intimacy is so profound. And then because these are spiritual symbols, because this is a spiritual occasion of pilgrimage, the intimacy between them and God is really profound. And as a Catholic artist myself, I mean, there is such a focus in Christian thought on the wounds of Christ and how he uses his wounds to draw into greater intimacy with others. I mean, most especially when he takes the fingers of Thomas, the apostle, and puts it inside of his wound, right?
Yes.
And that idea, that visual comes to my mind as you talk about your experience as an artist, because there is that same kind of bonding and intimacy and relationship via these wounds. Mm-hmm. I mean, tattoos are wounds essentially. Oh, yeah. And there's this Christological, this Christ-like intimacy occurring there that is even more deep than the normal sort of intimacy that occurs between artist and viewer. I don't know. That's just a 2 cents I want to add, and I want you guys to be able to comment on that. That said, I referenced at the opening of this episode, and you just referenced it again, Wassim, despite the beauty and the sacredness and the intimacy of this act, there are a lot of people who just kind of assume that tattoos are sinful, that they're bad. And most of the time when you ask them why they think that, they don't really know. They'll say something about like, oh, the body is a temple or whatever. I'll be frank, the Catholic Church itself has never really said tattoos are bad. They have certain limitations on what you should get and things like this, but pretty unequivocally the church does not argue that it's sinful. I'm curious to have both of you, though, you, Father Gabriel, as a priest, you, Wassim, as an actual tattoo artist, talk about the morality of tattooing as you understand it, and maybe even reflect more on this intimacy and this Christ wound thing that I'm putting out there, because I think that's interesting food for thought.
Yeah. Wow. If I may, I will start with this, and then Gabriel can continue maybe about the more about the Bible. But so a very interesting thing that you said, and that I feel a lot with Orthodox pilgrims, Ethiopians specifically, and what a coincidence. Wow. A few days ago, I tattooed this Ethiopian man, and Ethiopians like to get tattooed with either the crucifixion of Jesus or the resurrection of Jesus, but mainly the Virgin Mary and the Child, the Madonna. They love it. And for them, that's a very close, intimate relationship between mother and child. That's why they want to get it. Jesus and his mother holding him. And for women, that's a very, very that's the major image that we do for tattoo on Ethiopians. But what they say is a lot. I hear it a lot. Is that I want to feel the pain of Jesus a little bit by getting this tattoo, and I want to shed blood in the Holy Land. They are happy that they are doing this tattoo, and they ask, "Is there any blood?" And I show them a little dot of blood sometimes by squeezing it squeezing a piece of napkin on there. And sometimes they take that piece of blood. So they want to shed the blood, and they want to feel the piece, the piercings, and they want to feel the stabs of the needle, to feel the pain of Jesus in the Holy Land themselves, their own experience of the pain. So that's something that is very very beautiful. Another thing that comes to my mind is a week ago, I have tattooed this American young man who got, I think, 9 tattoos. Wow. So on the inside of the palm, outside of the hand, on each one of his hands, on his legs, on his feet, and of course one here.
The side, yeah.
So you got the full stigmata.
One cross, the stigmata, one white cross, one Jerusalem white cross on each of those places. And while I was surprised by how calm this person was, and how, in what spiritual status he was, getting those tattoos in the most painful places. And he was smiling while I was doing those tattoos, because he was receiving this pain in such a spiritual greatness, that he wanted to feel the pain of Jesus and have the stigmata on him, and to talk about it whenever everyone is going to ask him about those tattoos when he has this, So that's what comes to my mind when you said that.
That's super cool.
That's incredible.
Gabriel, do you have any thoughts on what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, go. Yeah.
And getting a tattoo is really, and that's what I know about getting tattoos from a biblical point of view. We as Christians, we're okay to get tattoos. Even if the Bible says you shall not mark your body, but it says you shall not mark your body for the dead. I am your God. And that comes from an ancient Canaanite practice, where the Canaanites used to burn the dead, take the ashes of the dead, and do stigmata and do cuts in their body, and put the ashes in their flesh and their skin to glorify the dead. And that's where God came and said, you shall not mark your body for the dead, because they are not your gods. I am your God. And that's the verse in the Bible. And that's why if you get a tattoo not for the dead, it's okay. And I think if you get a tattoo for the dead, like as remembrance, For example, like a cross, or it says mom or something for somebody who lost their mom. It's okay as long as you're not using the ashes of the dead. I think.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah.
putting somebody's ashes inside your
Definitely
body.
don't put somebody else's ashes
Oh
in your
man, I
body.
have
Yeah,
done
yeah.
this. People come to my shop and they have ash in there, and they say, "Can you mix this with the ink I want? This is from my late husband." I mean, like you're stuck in that situation where you're
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Leviticus. I don't know. Shall I do it? Shall
Yeah,
I not
this is like, it does seem like kind of directly Leviticus, actually. That's the problem. Oh man, like, I'm sorry, here's this book you need to read. I'm sorry. That's yeah. No, but that's so okay. So you brought up, it's exactly this passage. Just so I say, like, where in the Bible does it all talk about tattoos? And it's just this one passage. Well, kind of just this one passage from Leviticus 19:28. Just exactly, you say, shall not make gashes in the flesh for your dead, or in size any marks on yourselves, and as you say, like, so what's the context here? So there are these practices of mourning, where the tattoos are a ritual procedure by which they're a specific act of a kind of a worship of the dead, a reverence for the dead that involves a certain worship for them, or a notion of the dissolution of the body that doesn't, and its glory, a certain like earthly glory that doesn't fit with, like, as you say, I am the Lord your God. As well with that is that there's this strong practice in a lot of ancient Near Eastern cultures, where tattoos would be marks of servitude. So to get a tattoo, and there were a number of religions in the time and the place where our scriptures are written, where you would somebody, a devotee of a god, would get an image sacred to that god, or something like this, tattooed on their flesh, as a mark of being in strict servitude to that god, that I am owned by that god, and so,
Like a brand.
it's
almost.
literally like a brand. I mean, this gets carried on. This is not foreign to any tradition. In fact, this is a major thing in the ancient Greek and Roman traditions as well. Like literal brands, or tattoo type branding type tattoos. So this makes sense, that I mean, this is the constant logic of Leviticus is this: I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. You shall serve no other gods but me. So then what does this mean when you're in a different cultural context, when tattoos are not like a means by which I indicate ownership of a pagan god, So, I mean, as Christians run into cultures that have tattooing practices throughout history, they respond to it basically in a pretty, I would say, like, low key and chill way. Like in 796, for instance, this is the time period I study, papal legates say, they see these newly converted peoples in Northumbria in England, and they had tattooing practices, and they say, like, well, listen, if you're tattooing, they're thinking about Leviticus, and they say, if your tattooing practices are specifically used in the worship of a false god, then you have to stop. But if they are an expression of the Christian faith, then by all means. And that's ultimately, like, this is pretty much where we land on this, is that, like,
Turns out ancient Christians were like a hell of a lot more chill than we, generally speaking, give them credit for.
right. Yeah. that there is, that in fact, as you're saying from these clients that you're talking about, Wassim, is that there's there can be in the life of faith of an individual person this very strong desire to express, in fact, servitude to the Lord, or the memorial presence of the Lord, that I want to have this literally before my eyes always, and so, it's neither enjoined nor prescribed, right? It's just sort of like, if this is something in the individual person's worship of the Lord that that makes sense for them, that is their way of having the death and resurrection of the Lord before their eyes always, then all right.
Thank you for sharing that, Father, because I think that's that does add the cultural component, right? I mean, context always helps out with a lot of things, and I think that, context, especially with this, is helpful. Wassim, I know we've kept you a really long time, and I want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to let you go really soon. But you touched on something that I want to ask you kind of one more question about. I'm hoping you can speak to it a little bit. You talk about how you sort of modernized the practice in your shop from what it was, maybe a little bit less cleanly than you'd maybe like it to be, to something a little bit more modern and sleek and hygienic and these kinds of things. But something that you also mentioned that was interesting to me was the women in your family who you observed working in this art. And I don't know, maybe you don't know anything about this. If you don't, that's totally fine. But, something you encounter whenever you study the history of different art forms is that some art forms are like exclusively male and some art forms are exclusively female, right? So there are periods in theater, for instance, where only men are allowed to do it, or there are, periods in certain textiles where only women are allowed to do it. I'm curious, do you know anything about the history of women and men working as tattoo artists in this tradition in your family, in kind of the broader tradition of that region? And then more broadly, I guess, whether or not you know anything about that, I'd be curious to hear you talk about the technique of tattooing in the ancient world, how it was actually done in the history of your family going back to Egypt versus how it's done now. I've talked to, for instance, some like Polynesian tattoo artists who still practice the hammer and the quill with the ink inside the quill, and they sort of almost like a hammer and chisel kind of a thing. I don't know how it worked in your tradition, but I'd be really interested to hear kind of a juxtaposition of the history. What do you know about all that?
Okay, on the subject of women, all I know is that we're okay with it. My family is okay with it. We've never had a problem of a woman tattooing. And you are talking about the Middle East. You're talking about the Arab mentality and the Arab restrictions, a lot of restrictions that we have, by the way. And sometimes people ask me, don't you ever have problems that you have a tattoo shop inside the old city of Jerusalem among all those, the religious people, Jews and Muslims, by the way. So, which for them is taboo, a tattoo shop is taboo. So not only the tattoo, not only women, but also the tattoo shop itself, the presence and the existence of a tattoo shop itself in this type of culture is not an okay thing at all, by the way. But we have made it 500 years and we're still here. So 500 years in Holy Land. So, and they ask me this question, I'm like, we're here before all those people. So it's going to be, we're here before COVID. So COVID killed us for a couple of years, but we're still here. We survived 700 years of tattooing. We're going to survive. So for women, also the same thing. We're okay with it. We never had a problem of a woman, doing tattoos. Actually, I think they did a better job than all the men, except for my grandfather, because my grandfather's tattoos were really beautiful. And I saw a lot of those tattoos that my grandfather has done on people who came and said, this is from Jacob Razzouk. This is from Jacob Razzouk. He did a great job. But also the women were okay with it, specifically because a lot of the pilgrims were actually women. And getting a tattoo from a woman is an easier experience for a Ethiopian old lady that wants to get a tattoo on her thigh, by the way, which a lot of them used to get, is an easier experience than a man doing it for them. And why the thigh is because it's a place where they can hide the tattoo, by the way, women.
Interesting. Okay.
So for that reason, I think I don't know anything more about that. I have to be honest that I have a daughter that's 7 years old, and she says she wants to become a tattoo artist, and I can't wait.
Awesome.
At maybe another 5 or 6 years, she will start tattooing. My son started tattooing when he was 13 years old, my younger son. So she's not far away from that. I will live to see that. I hope. It's only 5 years from now. She will be 13. For the practice, I have tools in my shop that you can see from my grandfather and great-grandfather. So all they used was a little small stick, maybe as long as my finger. So a small wooden stick with some needles, attached to it with a thread. And they would use, some ink, and they would just one dot at a time would, pierce the skin. And there's even a picture of my great grandfather doing a tattoo on a Russian pilgrim, or either Armenian or Russian pilgrim, doing this with a small stick. And it's in my shop. This picture is in my. You can look it up, by the way. It's on the internet or maybe on our website. But so yeah, the technique was this. The ink, which is interesting, that I call holy ink. We don't use it anymore because we're not allowed to use it. But my grandfather used it. So the ink that he used was actually homemade ink, and my grandmother used to make the ink for my grandfather. They would get some oil lamps, and the oil would be from the Holy Sepulchre Church, and they would light those oil lamps and have a ceramic plate on top of it, and a few of them actually. I remember this little room that they had in their house where there was always lamps. And I thought they were praying. They were not praying. They were making ink. So they would collect the soot from those plates that they had put on top of the fire, and then this soot was mixed with oil and wine, and that was used as ink. So that's the holy ink that my family used. I'm not allowed to use it to make it. I don't want to use it, but I think that's one of the things that they used to do. They used to do, and this is the technique that they use. My grandfather my father actually built my grandfather's first electric machine using a doorbell, because he wanted he wanted my grandfather to do more tattoos faster, because all those women were sitting on the stairs. They couldn't go home waiting to get a tattoo because he was so slow. He needed to be faster. So with the help of another classmate of his who was handy and he knew more about electricity, they created and they built a very heavy and chunky tattoo machine. I pity my grandfather for using that from a doorbell, because the doorbell is with a magnetic electric mechanism, and they used that to attach a needle to it, and he started doing that until he started tattooing British soldiers who were like, "Why are you using this? There is already something that is more professional back in England." And so I said, "So bring me some." So they started bringing him some. The British soldiers during the British Mandate brought my grandfather more modern tools that were made in London, in England. And then when my father went to England, he started bringing tools for my grandfather and for himself, of course, and for his sister to use. So and nowadays, when I use one of those very modern battery-driven pen-shaped machines, and not even doesn't look like what I call a tattoo machine, but a lot of people call a gun. I hate that word, but that it really looks like a gun. People ask me, "Wow, this modern tattoos, modern tattoo tools," and I'm like, "Yeah, we are traditional. We are very historic. It doesn't mean we don't use new tools." My grandfather used a doorbell to create something newer than what he had, which is just a stick. It's okay. I mean, if my grandfather would see this new tattoo machine that I use, which is probably lighter than a watch, which would allow you to do more tattoos without having problems on your wrist, he would have loved it and wished he had worked like this. I see pictures of my grandfather with this chunky big machine tattooing people. So yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point of art, right? Is you carry on the tradition from your forefathers, you carry on the tradition from all the people who have participated in it before, but you add something new to it and you modernize it and you carry it on for future generations. as sort of a parting thought, Wassim, we do this podcast for artists who listen and who draw inspiration from it. Do you have just any brief advice that you could offer to up and coming artists from your own experience, maybe to tattoo artists who are starting out or are trying to deepen in their craft, maybe to just general artists who want to learn maybe something from what you've learned in all your years practicing? Any 2 cents you would give, either from a spiritual place or from a technical place, of how to just be a little better of an artist tomorrow?
Wow, you made me feel so old now that I have to give advice to younger tattoo artists, but I already feel old because I am already doing this to my children. So, so my 2 sons who are now tattooing in the shop with me. And my advice is, I think I have mentioned it in this podcast, is don't just do a tattoo for somebody because, first of all, not for the money. Of course, we do this for the money all the time. Of course, this is what we do. This is artists do the art because they want to, that this is their bread and butter. And this is why my family stayed in the Holy Land, because of the money, the part of it, the professional part of it. So, and it's nice, and we have to appreciate that as a profession, and we want to make a good living out of tattooing. But as I tell my sons, do not just do a tattoo only because you want to get the money from it. The money is an important part, but the client is more important, because just imagine that this person who's sitting with you, who is giving you their skin to stab so many times, they want to give you a canvas for your art to do something beautiful for them, that they would have to live with it all their lives. And not only that this few minutes or hours, it doesn't matter. It's just a split second of their lifetime that they are going to spend with you. It's going to be an intimate experience for them. And you have to appreciate that. And you have to make this experience a very good experience, the best experience you can make for those clients. So if it means that you need to talk to them, talk to them. If it means that you have to cry with them, cry with them. If it means you have to laugh with them, laugh with them. If it means you have to hear their story, even if it's a painful story, it's okay. Sit down and listen. If they ask a question, answer it to the best of your knowledge, the best that you can. Be their friend for this little moment in time of their life that you are going to forget, but they're not going to forget. That's
beautiful. That's beautiful. So here's the plan, Father Gabriel. Next year in Jerusalem, we're going to go to Wassim's shop. His daughter is going to use illegal holy ink, and she's going to give us face tattoos of butterflies.
Okay,
that's the plan.
We'll do it.
She might like to do butterflies. I think she already does nice butterflies. Not
just right on our faces. And Father Gabriel, you can get on the top of your bald head there.
Yeah, it'll be great. Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, you guys can find out more about Wassim's work at razzouqtattoo.com. That's RAZZOUK tattoo.com. And hey, next time you're in the Holy Land, why not participate in this ancient tradition? Wassim, thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is valuable, and I'm sure I'm speaking for you too, Father Gabriel, when I say I've just so enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you doing this. You guys, I don't know how you can do this. I mean, for me, Zoom is a very weird place to be in. I don't like to be on Zoom. It's not a good place. I'm used to the shop. I'm used to people coming to talk face to face. But I really do appreciate all your work, guys. It's not an easy thing to do, just using a screen and doing a microphone and doing all what you do. It's a great job, guys. So, and thanks,
Wassim. It's been a gift for us, really. It's been a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Okay, you too. Have a nice day.
Wow, that was a really, really cool conversation. I was struck, and I'm curious, just as we sort of wrap up this episode, Father, for your big takeaways. I was struck by probably, and I'm sure you can predict this, but I was most struck by the radical intimacy that Wassim is talking about between the artist. I mean, just at the end there when he was talking about, if they need to cry with them, right? Like that's so beautiful, and that's so Christ-like. That wasn't something that I was expecting necessarily to get into, and I'm just so happy that we did.
Yeah, no, that was a beautiful thing. I have to say, one of the things that he offered that caught me the most was also towards the end, where he was saying, he's like, it's not about the money. Well, it is about the money, because this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm sure we'll have a whole episode on at one point. But like, I'm very passionate about this. That like, art for art's sake is garbage. I think it's like a deadly and a destructive ideology that led the world to bad places, and it should never be revived. Like, artists like deserve to be paid, and art makes money, and that is great.
What the heck are you? You mean I shouldn't just be doing this for exposure?
I know,
I shouldn't just be submitting logos to competitions and hoping to win.
I know it's crazy, but that's just how it is. But I loved his like radical comfort with that. Be like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, like my family is only even here at all because like we made more money here than we were making in Egypt, which is like so boss. So like, yeah, no, I think there's a pragmatism here that like, because it's just, you just want to, how does art work? Well, you want to see the world as it really is, and you want to like unveil for other people's eyes something that you have seen in a particular way that God has given you to see it. And that means that there's no reason to be afraid of any aspect of it, including like that you have seen that it makes you money and therefore you can do it again, or you've seen that it's not going to make you any money and this is the only time you'll ever be able to do it, and it has that valence and that preciousness, or whatever. But like, I just think that's great. And I think like, that attentiveness to reality and that wanting to kind of like expose what's there, has a beautiful potential there, especially with like the intimacy of the tattoo and like what it means in this historical context, the physical context of like having just come out of the Holy Sepulchre and like turning a couple of corners, and like there you go and you have a like something permanent, visibly externally permanent done, so that you always have that with you. Like, your reality is changed, and that's one way of like unveiling that for other people.
And this is something you talk about all the time, right? That ultimately Christianity isn't meant primarily to be a religion. It's meant to be this radical encounter with Christ, that we are changed as a result of encountering him. And the world is changed as a result of encountering him. And I think putting a fine point on that by your body having been changed by encountering where he walked and where he was. And I mean, again, even just the proximity of the shop to the sepulcher, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And oh my gosh, I mean, you talk about like not being afraid of any element of the artistic process. Like, holy shit, I understand why they can't, but I am so sad that they can't use the ash from the oil lamps mix. Like, I want a tattoo with the holy ink so much.
There goes any possibility I'll ever get a tattoo. Knowing that they can't use that ink, forget it. I'm not going to do it. Sorry.
No. Well, like I say, I mean, if somehow his 7-year-old daughter can give us holy ink face tattoos of butterflies, I think
that's a whole different world. Yeah. Yeah.
What was the alcoholic drink that he mentioned? I just got to get like 2 or 3 of those into you.
Arak, I think. Yeah.
Arak. Yeah. All right, guys. Next year in Jerusalem, we're all going to meet up. We're going to drink some Araks and get tattoos. We hope you guys have been super inspired by this conversation to go deeper with your art, to really embrace the inherent intimacy of your art, to, as Wassim was saying, cry with those who are crying, mourn with those who mourn, rejoice with those who rejoice, right? This is what art has the power to let us do. It has the power to let us be someone else's sad song that they can cry to, or happy song that they can jam to. And we are so privileged no matter what we're creating, whether it's that painting or that dance that I keep mentioning, or whether it's the kid that you're raising or the conversation that you're having, we're all creators at the end of the day. So lean into that intimacy, go be a badass, go forth and create cool things.
You've been listening to Creative Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Torretta OP and Jacob Flores Popchek, produced by Jessica Flores Popchek and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.